So in the United States, the view is that Ukraine is winning this war. It doesn't sound like that's true.
No, it's a lie. It's not just a misunderstanding, it's a lie. It's impossible. Everybody who's in politics and understand the logic, the figures, the data, no way.
Why is it impossible?
Because that way, the poor Ukrainians die every day.
Yes.
Hundreds and thousands, So my heart is with them. So it's tragedy. It's tragedy for Ukraine. But they will run out earlier from the soldiers, number of soldiers, than the Russians. What finally will count is boots on the ground. And the Russians are far stronger, far more numerous
There's more
than the
of
Ukrainians.
Many more. So
this strategy, what we are just supporting, is a bad engineering of the strategy.
So if the Biden administration has said our goal is to beat Russia, is to effect regime changes, to kill Putin and take him out of power.
They misunderstand probably the Russians. To understand the Russians, it's a difficult thing, especially if you have an ocean between you and Russia. So when we speak about politics, I mean Westerners, what is the focus point of our conversation? The focus point is freedom. How to provide more and more freedom to the people.
Yes.
When you speak on politics in Russia, this is not the number one issue. The number one issue, how to keep together the country, because the country is very big. And there's a privilege of the question how to keep together the country and not freedom. Freedom is just another issue, second, third, whatever. First, keep the country together. And that's generate a different kind of culture and understanding of politics. That's create a kind of military approach like
Yes.
they have. Always on security, safety, buffer zone, geopolitical approaches. It's not our culture, it's a different approach. It's legitimate to have that because it's their history. But we have to understand that we cannot beat them as we do just now. It's impossible. They will not kill their leader. They will never give it up. They will keep together the country and they will defend it. We finance more, they will invest more. If we send more technical equipment, they will produce more. So don't misunderstand the Russians.
So they're not going to get sick of Putin and throw him out.
Come on, it's a joke.
What would happen if the West succeeded in killing Putin? What would happen to Russia and its nuclear stockpiles?
Okay, so okay, may I recall one of my experience?
Yes.
So I was prime minister exactly at the time when the change happened in Russia, Putin after Yeltsin.
Yes. Yeltsin
was very weak and getting weaker and weaker. And I do remember the fear of that time here in Hungary and in Europe as well, whether there will be a new leadership or not. So the real fear here was that there will be an anarchy in Russia.
Yes.
Putin is out and no new guy who is coming in strong enough to keep together the country, the nuclear arsenal and the army control and so on. So everybody was happy when realized that after Yeltsin, Putin come in and started to control the military and the Russian power as a leader. So everybody was happy. I do remember that. So now Putin is in power for long, long years. We forgot about how dangerous when there is no strong leadership or interregnum in Russia. The interregnum is the worst case possible.
But that is our goal. That is the goal of the U.S. State Department.
Yeah, but it's a mistake. If this is the goal, it's a mistake.
It sounds very dangerous.
It's more than dangerous, Okay, if to sit in Washington, safe United States, is a different feeling than to sit here in Budapest. Ukraine is next door country, So what's going on there could have an immediate impact in 24 hours here in Hungary and so on. When I was very young, 86, if I remember well, there was an explosion of the nuclear power station in Ukraine by accident.
Yes.
And it infected us immediately. So if there is an escalation in Ukraine,
Chernobyl polluted.
Chernobyl, yeah, that could have an impact on us immediately. So Washington is far away, Russia and Ukraine is close. That's the Hungarian approach.
So, given the manpower imbalance between the Russian and Ukrainian armies and the attrition of the Ukrainian army, hundreds of thousands dead.
And many Hungarians as well. Nobody knows it. But we have a a strong minority, more than 150,000 people in the territory of Ukraine, which was earlier part of Hungary. So it's a historical minority community living there. They are part of the Ukrainian state, and they are conscripted now to the army. And they die. They fight for Ukraine, and Hungarians, soldiers dying for Ukraine as Ukrainian citizens. So we lost, Hungarian nation, we are losing lives daily as also.
At a certain point, they're going to need more men. They're going to need more soldiers. Where are they going to come from?
That's the most risky question. So if any Western country would send any boots on the ground, that would mean a direct war between the West and Russia. And we are in a third world war immediately. So it's a very dangerous moment now.
That's obvious to you.
Absolutely. Not for me. Everybody on the street. All the ordinary citizens are aware that we are living in a very dangerous moment. So the third world war couldn't knocking on our door. So we have to be very, very careful. And that's my message always to America as well at NATO summit. Be careful with that.
And what kind of response do you get when you say that?
You know, they are bigger, therefore they are more clever. So that's always the case.
So they don't listen to you.
We can say in that way also, yeah.
So if you were in charge of NATO, if you were, say, Joe Biden, what would your next move be in the war in Ukraine? What would you do?
Peace, immediately. Call back Trump. That's the only way out.
Call back Trump.
Call back Trump. Because, you know, you can criticize him for many reasons. I understand all the discussion, but, you know, the best foreign policy of the recent several decades belonged to him. He did not initiate any new war.
Yes.
He treated nicely the North Koreans and Russia, even the Chinese, you know. He delivered a policy which was the best one for Middle East, Abraham Accords.
Yes.
So that was a very good foreign policy. He's criticized that he's not educated enough to understand the world. This is not the case. Facts count. And his foreign policy was the best one for the world in the last several decades I have seen. And if he would have been the president at the moment of the Russian invasion started, no, it would be not possible to do that by the Russians. So Trump is the man who can save the Western world and probably the human beings in the globe as well. That's my personal conviction.
Can I ask you, just to skip around for 1 second, about the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Days before that invasion at the Munich Security Conference, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, said to Zelensky at a press briefing, we would like Ukraine to join NATO. Now, Ukraine joining NATO obviously cannot, is a...
It's a long story. When the idea of membership of Ukraine, NATO, was raised, it was in the summit of NATO, Bucharest, 2007 or 8. Russia was not strong enough to stop it. So there was a real chance at that time to integrate the Ukrainians into NATO. But it was rejected. There was no agreement among the big Western countries to do so, so it was postponed. But after 2 or 3 years later, the Russians became stronger and stronger and stronger. And now they are even stronger. So we missed the historical opportunity to do so. And this window of opportunity is not open anymore. So we can't do that. So we can't afford to have that long borderline between Russia and Ukraine, who belongs to NATO. That would mean immediate war danger to all of us, even in Washington. So it's dangerous even for the United States. It's not just dangerous for the region, but even for you, for the families.
Because it could provoke a nuclear exchange.
So it's not a realistic proposal at this moment. So forget about it. We should say just the opposite. We should make a deal with the Russians on the new security architecture to provide security, sovereignty for Ukraine, but not membership in NATO.
So why, and that I think your view is shared by many sober people who watch this, so why would the vice president say something like that at a moment when there were Russian troops massed on the Ukrainian border?
You know, it's difficult to follow the mindset of a big power like you are. So it's a different approach to everything than the approach of 10 million people of Hungary with the historical experience, knowing the Russians better than you know. You always think that you know better because of the Cold War, but it's not the case. You should
They never occupied Washington.
yeah. You should ask us. How does it work? What is the way of thinking? What is the cultural context?
So in the American media, you have been dismissed as a puppet of Russia, a friend of Putin's. I want to put on the screen a picture of you being arrested by Soviet-backed police as a young man. This country was occupied by the Soviets, by the Russians for 40 years. So given that, are you a bootlicker of Putin? Are you a puppet of Putin? What's your view on Putin?
When I have first time met him, come back as prime minister, we said very clearly, don't touch upon history, because the history between Russia and Hungary is rather sad. One of the main heroic attempts of the Hungarian nation to get freedom was launched against the Habsburgs in the middle of the 19th century, crushed by the army of the Tsar of Russia. They helped the Austrians because we were in the winning position.
Yes.
And the Russians were invited by the Habsburg, and they crushed the freedom fight here in Hungary. That's first. Then they occupied us in the Second World War. And then when we tried to get rid of their yoke, in 56, they crushed us again. So history is you know, if you ask anybody on the street that any Hungarian leader who is elected freely can be a puppet of Putin or the Russians, they say it's a joke, it's impossible. Because we are a sovereign country, and even to the Russians we deliver many times that we are sovereign. So I don't take seriously that kind of accusation. But of course, I try to have a rational relationship with the Russians, especially on economy and energy. And my personal point is that without involving the Russians into a security architecture of Europe, we cannot provide a safe life to the citizens of Europe. But now everything is going against it, unfortunately.
Well, Russia is hardly integrated into the security architecture of Europe. All of NATO is against, I mean, NATO is at war with Russia.
You know, what NATO does is rather strange. Because if you look at the official position of NATO as an institution, as an alliance, they're exactly saying what we said. So no involvement, and we should do as much as we can for peace. That's the official position of NATO. But at the same time, NATO says that member states of NATO should do their best to support the Ukrainians. You know, so we should clarify that what's going on, like United States foreign policy to support and finance the Ukrainians, it's not the policy of NATO, it's the policy of United States. That's a big difference.
But I mean, NATO countries now border over 1,500 miles of Russia. So it seems like the point, if you take a step back, the point of NATO is to provoke a war with Russia. I mean, that's what it seems like. What is the point of NATO?
The point of NATO is that we are stronger than the Russians are. That's very important to make clear. Okay, there is the nuclear armament,
yes,
which must be balanced, but on conventional weapon context, we, NATO, are far stronger than the Russians are. The Russians are not strong enough even to beat the Ukrainians just now. You know?
yes.
So therefore, if somebody is belonging to NATO, member of NATO, it's obvious that we are in a secure position. Russia is not able to threat our security. It's out of question because we are so strong. That's the number one point. The second is that some leaders of NATO, some member state leaders like your president, they had a strategy to crush the Russians somehow. And the strategy was that the Ukrainian soldiers will fight, and some member states of NATO will finance this fight by money and by military technical equipments. And this is the way how militarily we can beat the Russians. We Hungarians said very clear at the very first point, this strategy will never work. So this is a bad strategy. And now we have 1.5 years of the war, and it's obvious that this is a bad strategy. We have to stop it. We need a new strategy, or we should run as soon as we can for peace.